In Activity 11, Sharing Information Using Standard Units of Measure, students record their heights in standard units. They first practice reading a primary ruler by measuring classroom objects. Students then record measurement information and share it with teammates and the class. Consistent results in the activity show students the advantage of using standard units of measure. From the kit, you will need Activity Sheet 11, primary rulers, plastic trays, washable green markers, sticky notes, objects from the kit to measure such as index cards, large paper clips, and magnifiers, growth chart from Activity 8. You will also need to provide new unsharpened pencils, class height chart from Activity 8, classroom objects to measure such as new crayons or small books, small stickers. To prepare for the activity, make a copy of Activity Sheet 11 for each student. Take measurements ahead of time to speed the recording of student height measurements. Write each student's name and height in standard units on a sticky note, rounding off to the nearest whole unit. Next, check to be sure that the unsharpened new pencils each team will measure are the same length and mark the 0 point of each primary ruler with a green dot or a small sticker. For each team, assemble a tray of objects to measure with a ruler. Each tray should contain the same objects, which should fit on the tray and be shorter than the primary ruler. If possible, choose objects with measurements close to whole numbers. For example, each tray might contain an index card, large paper clip, and magnifier from the kit, and a new crayon from classroom supplies. To begin the activity, review the measurements of the different animals on the growth chart. Remind students that as they measured the heights of animals, they shared the numbers and units with everyone in the class, just like scientists do. Scientists measure and record. They share information or let others know the information they have learned. Remind students that they measured their own adding machine tape strips on the class height chart. Also review the use of the spoon ruler and the problems encountered when measuring with spoons. Next, gather the class around the growth chart and point to the scale of units and ask, who can remember what these marks are? Students should recall that those marks are units of measure, in this case, centimeters. Remind students that centimeters are one example of a standard unit of measure. Next, distribute Activity Sheet 11 and the sticky notes with students' names and heights. Explain that this is one way of sharing information with others using standardized units. Have students record their heights on their activity sheets. After all students have recorded their heights, ask them to share the measurement with the other person on their team. Remind them that because the whole class is using the same standard units of measure, it's easy to compare heights. Next, instruct students to place their sticky notes on their adding machine tape strips in the class height chart to complete the record of every student's height as measured in standard units. Display a primary ruler. Ask the class to tell you what it is and what they think the ruler is used for. Then ask students, what other kinds of rulers have we used? Students should recall the paperclip chain and the spoon ruler. You may wish to point out that the growth chart is also a kind of ruler. Demonstrate using the ruler to measure the length of a familiar object, such as a book. Show how to position the ruler against the object, with the green dot at one end, and how to take the measurement by finding the number closest to the other end. Distribute a primary ruler and unsharpened pencil to each team. Ask students, how could we find out how long this pencil is? Tell students to measure their pencils and record the results on their activity sheet. Next, distribute one tray of objects to each team. Allow students a few minutes to study the objects, then have them take turns measuring the objects and recording the measurements, both numbers and units, on their activity sheets. As partners work, they should share and compare their measurements, just as scientists do when they collect and record information. When the class is finished, call on selected students to report the length of one item that they measured. Help students recognize that all the measurements of a given item are the same because the units on every ruler are the same, or standard. To conclude the activity, return the materials to the kit. Also, return any classroom items you made available to the students for measure. Remember to leave the class height chart and growth chart in place if you intend to have students periodically remeasure their heights. For science background, reinforcement activities, curriculum connections, and information about the Delta Science readers, please consult your DSM Teacher's Guide.